Hello and welcome to Distillations. I'm one of your hosts, Lisa Berry-Drago. In response to the coronavirus pandemic, we've launched a brand new series focused entirely on COVID-19. Over the next several weeks, we'll be bringing you interviews with people working at the heart of the crisis, including biomedical researchers, physicians, and public health experts. In this episode, our senior producer Mariel Carr talks with John Maraganore, the CEO of Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, a company developing an antiviral medication for COVID-19. When news broke about the new coronavirus in January, John Maraganore made the decision to pause other drugs in development and pivot to working on an antiviral medication for this new and alarmingly infectious virus. He says it was a difficult decision, but this virus had all the ingredients to become a pandemic.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We know you're busy. Tell us what your company is working on right now with COVID.
We are currently at Alnylam, we are advancing an RNAi therapeutic for COVID-19 specifically. So our technology, RNA interference, is based on discoveries that were made in the late 90s that highlighted a way to target RNA for destruction in a very selective manner, obviously. And with RNA interference, obviously, we've been able to develop medicines for a whole range of different diseases. But one of the areas of interest historically has been viral infections, because many viruses are RNA viruses. And so we can directly target the viral genome, if you will. And so we're harnessing the RNAi technology that we built at the company for the last 18 years and are advancing an RNAi program that directly targets the SARS-CoV-2 genome, which is an RNA genome, and with the goal of destroying the genome in the cell so that it can no longer replicate. So basically developing a direct-acting antiviral that blocks the virus from producing new viral particles. And, the approach is about to go into formal development. We're close to having our development candidate declared as a company. That would then start a process to bring it to the clinic, which we expect to go in lightning speed into the clinic, certainly by the end of the year. So it's something which we hope will be part of the armamentarium of drugs and approaches that are being developed by our industry to target COVID-19 and find a solution so that we can all get back to our lives at the end of the day.
So tell me about the treatment that you're working on. How would it be administered and when? And I guess how often?
So this would be a drug that would be given by inhalation, just like, asthma drugs are given by an inhaler. And it would be given to people that are early in their infection. I mean, what we know about antivirals is that the earlier you give it, the more effective it's going to be. Mm-hmm. So ideally, provided it's safe, and it should be safe, but you'd like to give it as early as possible to people. Now, the other approach that we're going to explore is giving it so-called prophylactically. So not to treat an infection, but to prevent the infection. Mm-hmm. And here we would focus on people that are at risk. So it might be healthcare workers, might be elderly that are in a nursing home. It might be younger people that have comorbidities that are at risk for bad consequences if they get infected. Mm-hmm. And it might even be family members of somebody who's recently been infected, right. Or people that have, through contact tracing, been identified as having been exposed to somebody. So it's still a very large number of people that you can help in a prophylactic mode, but you basically start administering this drug even before somebody had a bona fide infection. And the goal would be to prevent the infection from ever happening to begin with.
Right. And so would that be something that people take continually? Or is it more like a one-time thing?
Yeah. I mean, this is the wonderful thing about RNAi, because it's very, very durable. In other words, it lasts a long time. So even, one administration, now, I don't know if that's just once or 3 times over a day or something, but one exposure to the drug would probably last for at least a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so effectively, it's almost like a vaccine, if you will.
Sure.
Not long-lived by like a vaccine, and it doesn't harness the body's immune system to fight the virus, but it almost has vaccine-like properties in a way that could provide durable protection for people that have been exposed, or for healthcare workers, or the other groups that I talked about. So it could be an approach that would be, in some ways, very much like a vaccine, and therefore would help open up people to, from a societal perspective, sooner.
Right.
At this point.
So that is, if this is available before a vaccine would be?
No, I mean, I think, look, even if the vaccine comes out, we don't know yet how effective the vaccine is going to be.
Right.
Hopefully it's very effective, and hopefully our treatment doesn't ever need to get used, to be honest with you. I really hope that we can all have a really great vaccine that would stop this forever, using our immune system to fight off future infections. But we just don't know yet. We also have to consider with our drug that it could also be used for future SARS outbreaks that occur that are related but not identical to this one, where a vaccine may not be effective. And so one of the things I think we have to, as a society, recognize is that history will repeat itself here.
Right.
We had SARS in 2003, we had MERS in 2009, 2010. Both of those were contained because they're relatively more dangerous. Mm-hmm. But it's probably going to happen again. The SARS, coronavirus type outbreak or pandemic. Now, maybe it's going to be every 100 years, like the last pandemic that occurred in 1918. I don't know. Maybe it'll be another 10 years. Hopefully not. But this drug, the one that we're developing, as long as we're targeting these conserved regions of the genome that should not change in future outbreaks that occur, we should have an approach that would be useful in the future if, or maybe when, the next outbreak occurs.
So tell me when Alnylam started working on this, because this is all brand new, right?
Yeah, it is new. And we started back in January. I mean, we were, hearing the news, listening to what was going on in Wuhan, and obviously began to get concerned about what we were hearing, and thought that it could be something which will need a therapeutic intervention. And our scientists began to look at the gene sequences that were coming out of out of China related to the coronavirus that was discovered. And we were quite struck with how relatively conserved the virus was that was coming out of China to the original 2003 SARS outbreak that occurred many years ago. And that meant to us that the regions of the virus that we can target with our drugs, our RNAi drugs, was very, very conserved. And it allows us to think about targeting the virus in conserved regions of the virus that not only will be applicable for SARS-CoV-2, but could in fact be applicable for future outbreaks of, future coronaviruses that might occur, hopefully won't, but might occur and probably will occur in the future.
Tell me what this means, conserved, that the virus was conserved.
Yeah, it means that there are regions of the viral genome that haven't changed. And the fact that they haven't changed implies and suggests that they're essential. So if you've got a virus that, replicates and produces new viral particles, and lots of times there are mutations and variations that occur in different regions of the genome for that virus, but then there are regions that are never changed over time, it means that that's a region that is really important for the virus to be able to survive.
Got it. So even if it's changing, there's one part of the virus that's essential for it to keep going and do damage.
Exactly. And so it can't change that region. Because it can't change that region, we can target that region and therefore, impair the virus from surviving. So that happened back in January. So we were beginning to see these sequences coming out of China and like, oh my God, look at that. This is really quite interesting. And at the same time, we were able to really, and this is somewhat unrelated, but thankfully it was happening in the company, we were working on delivery of our molecules to the lung airways to cells of the lung airways. And these are the cells that are infected by SARS-CoV-2. So by complete good fortune, I would say, there was a convergence of the work that we were doing on administering our drugs to the lung airways, together with the emergence of this virus that was showing highly conserved regions that could be targeted by RNAi drugs. And those two important facts came together. And in January, we began this effort to start develop a drug towards SARS-CoV-2. Now, our hopes at the way beginning of this effort, to be honest, was that this would all go away and that we wouldn't have to, we would ultimately want to develop a drug for a virus like this because it might reemerge. But, the hope was that it wouldn't be as bad as it has become. But of course, obviously with the disaster that's occurred with the pandemic, our efforts have only been heightened in terms of the work that we're doing. It's become a top priority for the company now to really advance this product and get it to the clinic as quickly as possible. We've never been able to go from start of a program to start of a clinical study in less than a year. Our previous land record was 18 months.
Wow.
So getting this done within a year, if not less than a year, is going to be a complete new paradigm from a timing perspective. And it just speaks to the urgency that our scientists and our team have to do this as quickly as we can so that we can ultimately find a treatment for this terrible viral infection.
And what was the reason that you'd already been working on delivering drugs to the lungs?
Well, there's a lot of diseases in the lung airways, right? Whether it's asthma or COPD or other diseases, cystic fibrosis. So, targeting the lungs was an opportunity of developing medicines for a number of diseases that are known. Mm-hmm. And of course, it did occur to us by looking at the lungs that we could also target viral infections of the lung, like flu or another virus called RSV, for example. But SARS and coronavirus was not on our radar screen when we did that work. But fortunately, the work was being done in a timely manner so that we can now, leverage that work for the benefit of our SARS-CoV-2 effort.
Oh, wow. That is a nice coincidence.
Yes, indeed.
So what was it like as a company to pivot to something like this really quickly, to something that's happening in real time?
Yeah, again, it's probably one of the beauties of our technology, the fact that we can use genomic information, we can use the gene sequence as a way to design our drugs. That is, something which we've had in our technology from the beginning. And it does allow us, as soon as those gene sequences become known, it does allow us to rapidly deploy our technology to basically develop a new medicine. And so, but from an internal perspective, what it obviously takes is you rally your group of scientists together and you look at the need to adjust things within your plans, and you stop some things that you were doing before so that people can shift and focus and work on this new thing coming out. But when you have a public health crisis, that's what you do. You've got a situation where, thousands of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people will die. And you've got no choice but to jump on that as a company and do everything you can to deploy your resources and efforts toward finding a solution.
Wow. Yeah. So does this mean that other things are now just on hold for the time being?
Yeah, there were some programs that we had to put on hold. I think obviously we can return to them later on, but there were some programs that we had to basically slow down or stop for the time being so that we can put our muscle behind this effort. And it's the right thing to do. What we do in our industry, what we do with companies like Alnylam is we make medicines, and if there's a public health crisis crying out for a medicine, it's just a crying call for efforts like ours to begin to work on it very quickly.
Was there a moment when you realized that this is what you had to do? Was it immediate?
Over the course of a couple weeks, it became a topic of debate within the senior team. Some of us had just come back from the annual healthcare conference in January, the JP Morgan conference, and we were back in the office, and we were all reading and seeing what was going on in China. Hard not to see that given the news coverage that was going on. And, a number of us felt we should jump on this right away. We should move on it right away. Others were more anxious that, boy, that would distract us from other things that we have to do. And this probably would just go away and we shouldn't get, too distracted by this. And so there was actually a live debate at the time within our senior team. Thankfully I was much more in favor of moving. And that helps when you're the CEO. But there were people on my senior team who appropriately were saying, gosh, can we really do this? And we're just distracting us. And it's unlikely this is going to be a problem in the world. And of course that they were wrong. They were voicing an important view, which is great. But at the end of the day, I'm glad that we took the plunge and dove into it because we, obviously we could have come back to it weeks later or months later, but we would have lost time.
Right.
So now, by jumping on it very quickly, we were able to obviously, gain time and move along with this and do everything we can to bring this medicine to patients as quickly as possible.
I think we're all used to hearing about outbreaks that happen around the world. It's not anything new, but this is really the first time, at least, in my life and lots of people's lives, that it's actually gotten to that worst case scenario. So how could someone in your position totally change tracks every single time something like this happened because, you'd never get anything else done?
It would be pretty distracting, right? To your team. Yeah. Because whether it was Ebola or the swine flu or even the original 2003 SARS, so there's so many examples of health crises that emerge and of course get dealt with through other measures that are effective, which is terrific. Thank God. But as a company, you have to make sure that you think about how you build your team and focus people and not get them distracted by everything that's going on. But this just had in my eyes, this just had the ingredients early on of becoming a pandemic, and well before it was called a pandemic, it was a pandemic, and there was just no doubt that this was going to have the type of impact that it ultimately did. When you see something that's so infectious, when you see, R0 scores that are over, 2 or 3, and you realize and you just see the situation that was happening in Wuhan with the numbers of people that were infected, given global travel and given how, the world is configured, I had no doubt at all that this would become a pandemic. And obviously the mortality rate is unacceptably high. And we have to do something to fight it. We can't just wait for this just to pass, because it'll leave a lot of dead bodies, in the path, which is just not acceptable.
Wow. Well, I have to say this is all making me feel more hopeful than I had been feeling. I think a lot of people feel like we now know that this can happen. It's happened once. It can happen again. It probably will happen again. And we're pretty much defenseless.
Yeah. Well, whether it, and hopefully if it happens again, we have drugs like the ones that we're developing that could be there to treat it. It could also just be second waves of this that happen. Obviously we're in the first wave now. Hopefully it abates and goes down. But, many people believe, and I think we do as well, that there's likely to be increases in infection in the fall that occur again. So having drugs available for that second wave or even third wave is going to be something which will be important.
So why is there not already a drug like this? Is it just because the other outbreaks we've seen have gotten contained much more quickly?
Yeah, those other outbreaks got contained, or they contained themselves. There was work being done at the time of the original SARS 2003 outbreak to develop some drugs. We weren't doing anything, but other people were. But the outbreak or the virus ultimately got contained, and there was basically no market, no economic incentive for people to finish their job. One of the things I think is so critical about this pandemic is that the industry needs to finish their job this time. And the public sector needs to support the industry to finish their job and make sure that there's a right reward, within reason for finishing their job so that we can stockpile medicines like this for the future. So that's going to be important, I think. That's sort of something for tomorrow, not for today, because obviously right now we're in a hair on fire moment, with this pandemic. But, and we will get through this. We certainly will get through this. And we're on the other side of this terrible situation that we're in right now. If for some reason new medicines haven't been part of the answer, which I think they will be, we need to make sure that we finish making these new medicines so that the next time this happens, we're prepared as a society.
Yeah. Do you think science and medicine are going to be different? Do you think that they'll change because of this pandemic?
I do. Yeah, I think there's a lot of learnings from this that frankly are good learnings. One is the fact that during this period, there's been incredible cooperation across science and scientists and clinicians around sharing information in ways that I've never seen before. Nobody's ever seen before. And that ranges from just, papers being published in scientific journals quickly, without paywalls and limitations to people seeing it. It includes just how social media-based approaches to sharing information have been effective. Obviously, there's a lot of junk out there too, so you have to know what's a good source. But at the end of the day, the information that's been shared and the knowledge that's been gained and the pace of that knowledge being gained is just unmatched in terms of anything I've ever seen before. I mean, look, it took the industry many, many years to find cures for HIV that ultimately converted, AIDS from a fatal disease to a disease that, people can die with, which is great. And hopefully we can do something a lot quicker here as an industry. And I think we will. I think this is something which is going to be measured in months, not years, from an industry perspective. And yes, science and medicine will be different now because I think we've learned the power of working together, the power of knowledge transfer in a very different way than before. And I think that's going to be a powerful force for the future.
Any closing words of wisdom for all the people out there that are still worried?
I think we're going to get through this. It's going to take some resolve by everybody. It's going to, without a doubt, be the worst thing that our generation, our groups of people have to go through. I mean, unless you were old enough to make it through World War II, this is that moment for our generation, our society. But just like those people got through the adversity and got through the terrible period that they were living through, we will too. And science and innovation will prevail. Science and innovation will solve this problem. And it's going to happen. It's just going to take a little bit of time, whether it's a few more months or a year or 18 months, whatever. That's a short period of time in the greater scheme of things. And we will get through this and we'll get to the other side of it and we'll all be stronger. We will all be stronger when this is done. There's no doubt about that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Pandemic Perspectives. We'll be bringing you more interviews from all sides of the crisis, so stay tuned and watch your feeds. As always, you can find all of our episodes, plus transcripts and show notes at distillations.org. And you can find tons of educational resources on our website at sciencehistory.org/learn. The Science History Institute remains committed to revealing the role of science in our world. Please support our efforts at sciencehistory.org/give now. For Distillations, I'm Lisa Berry Drago.